Okay, today's Q&A is about Sephardim, and the question is, are Sephardim allowed to eat food which is certified as kosher by Ashkenazim? So, just about all the national and local hashgachas in the United States are managed by people who are Ashkenazim, and as you would expect, they follow Piskei Halacha, they follow rulings that work for Ashkenazim, that are correct according to Ashkenazim. Now, in a lot of ways, Ashkenazim are stricter than Sephardim, like, for example, as it relates to kashering and which poultry breed should be considered kosher, and that means that food that's certified to an Ashkenazi standard, so to speak, are fine for Sephardim. From that perspective, they're fine for the Sephardim. And then there are other situations where Ashkenazi hashgacha will take a stance that doesn't affect the kashrus of the food, but might affect something else. But what I mean as an example is, they'll write the bracha on this food is shehakol, while Sephardim might disagree and think that the bracha on that food is hadama. So it doesn't affect the kashrus of the food, but the Sephardic person should know that the what it says there, or the stance that's being taken, is based on Ashkenazi way of looking at things, and Sephardim might want to ask the rabbi whether they agree with that decision. Okay, so those are two things that are pretty innocuous, relatively, for Sephardim. But there are some places where the Sephardim take a stricter stance than the Ashkenazim, and that means the Sephardim have to think, do I want to eat this food with an Ashkenazi hechsher on it because of these reasons where maybe the Ashkenazim, for them it's perfectly okay, but for me it wouldn't be. So I'm going to mention three of the most common ones. There are others, but these are the three most common. The first is that if an animal's lungs have a certain kind of mucus adhesion to them, it's called a sircha, then the animal will often be considered a treifa, which means there's something wrong with it, to the point that it's not considered kosher. Okay. Now, the Ramah, meaning the Ashkenazim, allows for certain ways of checking these sirchas to decide that even though the something that looks sort of like a sircha, the animal is kosher anyhow. I mean, the Shulchan Aruch does not accept those methods, many of these methods that the Ashkenazim use. Now, the Sephardim, of course, follow what the Shulchan Aruch says, not like the Ramah, and therefore they wouldn't want to eat the regular kosher meat, even if we call it glad, because glad is still, seemingly, is not good enough for what the Sephardim need to have. Now, certain hashgachas, what they'll do is, when there's meat that's good enough, that meets the standard that Sephardim would want, they call it chalak or beit Yosef. Those are ways of trying to describe that even a Sephardic person would want to eat this food. But as a consumer, you should know that there are different standards of what qualifies as chalak or beit Yosef. And you should really have to think about this before you buy the brand, which is to say, the Sephardic person wants to have the standard that is good enough for him. So he should really find out what the standard the hashgacha uses, the Ashkenazi hashgacha uses, called chalak, good enough for Sephardim, and then check with his rabbi whether that's really good enough for them. And just in passing, I know we're talking now about Sephardic chumras that Sephardim have. You should just know Ashkenazim have many chumras regarding shechita that Sephardim do not agree to. So they should be careful about eating meat that was only certified for Sephardim, because actually it might not be good enough for the Ashkenazim. Okay. Anyhow, back to the chumras of the Sephardim. The second one is, another difference has to do with Bishul Yisrael, which is requirement that a Jewish person has to be part of the cooking for certain foods, certain cooked foods. So first Ashkenazim say that it's possible that a food could leave a factory as Bishul Akum and later be upgraded to Bishul Yisrael when a Jewish person finishes off the cooking. Like, for example, rice might be partially cooked in the factory, and it would leave the factory as Bishul Akum because a non-Jewish person cooked it. But the hashgacha will say, we're okay with that because the yid who buys it, who will cook it at home, he will finish it off and make it Bishul Yisrael. Well, that's a position that only an Ashkenazi could take. Sephardim do not agree with that, and they would not be allowed to eat that rice. Another thing related to Bishul Akum is that Ashkenazim say you can make something Bishul Yisrael if a Jew turns on the fire that are going to be used for the cooking, and the Sephardim say the yid has to put the food onto the fire. It doesn't help to just turn on the fire. You have to put the food onto the fire. And that has to do, it's particularly relevant in restaurants, but it also has to do with factories, how Bishul Yisrael is created when you want it to be Bishul Yisrael. Okay. And now our third common area where Sephardim take a stricter stance on Ashkenazim is, as relates to Hilchos Shabbos, that Ashkenazim have certain kulas about putting food back onto the fire on Shabbos, which the Sephardim would not agree with. And that means that if a caterer is making an event for Sephardim, they have to have special instructions of how to warm the food for Shabbos to make sure they meet the requirements for those customers. Now, I just mentioned these couple of main areas where Sephardim take a stricter stance, but the truth is there are other ones as well, and Sephardim really should become educated and know what they can or can't eat with Ashkenazi hechsher.